Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wall Street for Main Street podcast. My name is Mo Daoud, and today's guest is a returning guest. We have him on every once in a while to give us an update on what's going on from China. Now, this guy actually lives in China, unlike other people that interview, investors and so-called experts on what's going on in China who never been to China or just they think they know it all. Well, what's going on in China? We have Dan Collin with me. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mo. Glad to be back.
Well, Dan, let's talk about what's going on in China. And in China, it seems like the mainstream media here in the U.S. got some kind of a propaganda war going on against China regarding their economy. Because I'm seeing a lot of stuff on CNBC, CNN, trying to, trash their economy. That the bubble, that everything's about to blow.
Yeah.
So do you believe there's a propaganda war going on against China?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. This has been going on for 15 years. There's certain people in the U.S. intelligence circles, I see him time and time again on the media, and there's one guy in particular, Gordon Chang, who wrote a book, something collapsing China. He wrote that back in 1999, and back then the GDP was $500 billion. It's now $10 trillion. So I don't know how wrong you have to be before you admit you're wrong. But there's some government propaganda in there. But now recently, this year, the new thing is the hedge fund propaganda. What I've noticed is, and let's start off first. The Chinese economy is not as strong as it's ever been. It got caught up in the whole global tailwind with crashing commodities. But what people don't realize is, as a commodity producer, that means they get cost reduction on all their input commodities, and then they re-export products. So, regardless of back to this hedge fund issue, what happened is when we saw the emerging market currencies get taken to the woodshed the last couple of years. I'm talking about the Russian ruble, Brazilian currency, India. I mean, you name it across the board. Emerging market currencies got hit hard, 40%, 50%. China held up. They held up to the dollar within 3-4%. Yet all you hear is, how China's currency is collapsing, as if 3% is a collapse of some kind. Well, what happened then is it looks to me the hedge fund said, China's the next to drop. And not hold up against the dollar, and then it was just full on interview after interview with every hedge fund manager, Kyle Bass, Ray Dalio, all these guys. It was funny, a couple months before that they're saying how China will do fine and it's fundamentally sound, and then 2 months later they're going to collapse. Well, what I put on the China Money Report, you can see they've had their faces ripped off on the currency, and Chinese government has gone in to support the currency. And I think most of these hedge funds have taken big losses on it.
Yeah, a lot of them had shorted the currency and they lost big time.
Yeah, the currency actually reversed on them and got stronger, and it's relatively stable. I mean, China's keeping it relatively stable against the dollar, as they have for for a decade.
Right. I think the biggest propaganda I see against the Chinese economy is, well, I'm not saying they're not right, but they accuse them of manipulating their own currency. Now, China is essentially, the economy is centrally planned, just like the U.S., but the U.S. is manipulating their own currency too, so they're being a hypocrite right now.
Yeah, everyone's manipulating their currency against the dollar, and the U.S. is printing it. So it's a right mess.
Yeah, and China is forced to buy the U.S. dollar in form of treasury right now, even though that kind of slowed down the past few years, ever since the 2008 financial crisis, and the U.S. government decided to crank up the printing press and try to stimulate the economy. The Chinese government has slowed down their buying of the
their treasury purchases have stalled since 2008-09. They held around 1.3 trillion. Now they've been a net seller the last 3-4 months. All that currency accumulation of trade surpluses that they do have, which by the way just hit $365 billion in 2015. That's $1 billion trade surplus with the United States every day. That is getting now put back into companies to buy up U.S. assets. And you've seen the lists of companies that are getting bought up by the Chinese, and then the propaganda treats it as capital flight. Oh, look at all the currency leaving China. Yeah, it's going up and buying everything. You know, I mean, the deal making this year already has hit $25 billion which is 2 times what it was all of 2015. So you're going to just continue to see more of this. All of that printed money, all of those trade deficits, going to come back here to buy up real assets.
Yeah, they really heated up their buying spree of real estate in this country and companies as well.
Yeah, they just today announced a new bid. Anbang Insurance is put a bid in up to, $14.5 billion for the Starwood Group. So this is just, and this money's not coming from them. It's actually $15 billion now. So it's not coming from them. They're getting backstopped by the Chinese banks, which are getting green lights from the government to go up and buy up real assets with all this monopoly money.
Right. So you travel back and forth from U.S. and China. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on with the election, especially Donald Trump and his plan on how to bring the job back into this country, especially the job that's overseas in China.
Yep.
He's trying to. He said he's planning to increase tariff on any import from China. So I want to get your thoughts on that. What impact would that have on the Chinese economy, and what impact that would have on our economy?
Well, I find it funny because the world has had a trade war with the United States for 30 years. It's just the U.S. is too dumb to recognize it. The average tariff in China today for United States produced goods is 12.5%. And the average tariff for Chinese goods to the United States is less than 2%. So there is no such thing as free trade. It doesn't exist. It's like the biggest thing everyone's talking about, but nobody questions, is it actually on an equal basis? Of course it's not. Japanese will not buy Korean cars. Koreans won't buy Japanese cars. None of them are going to touch American cars. They all have put in transparent and non-transparent, not only tariffs, but non-tariff trade barriers to protect their local national champions in different industries and suck jobs out of the United States for the last 30 years. And that's how we've ended up in the United States with almost 100 million people working age that don't work. And yet we live under the illusion we have almost full employment at 4.5%. So Donald Trump has the economic part right. It's not going to get any worse in terms of a trade war. You could, I think you could have a jobs boom in the United States. You just do 2 things. You knock the corporate tax rate down to 20% from a world's high of 40%. And then you you'd collect your tax revenue off the imported goods instead of the production of the productive economy that's left in the United States. What people don't realize is nobody's going to put a plant here and pay 40% tax unless you absolutely have to. That's why everything's been offshored. Every physical plant's been offshored that it can possibly be offshored. The only ones that are left are, say, food and car assembly. But, car assembly, you have 500 jobs on the assembly line. There's 10,000 that are in Korea, Japan, and China for all those parts that you have to make. Where every part needs a factory. So Donald Trump has the economic equation right. The other people, Barry Sanders, he just wants to take more from the top. He's kind of a communist. I don't think he understands how the economic system works. And Clinton is just part of the system. She was on the board of Walmart for a decade, so she knows the game. And they're all defending the system that is leading us deeper and deeper into a dark hole of debt and joblessness.
Yeah, our candidates, that's not very good. A lot of them are bad in their own ways. We got a socialist or communist running for president. We have a classic establishment candidate, and we have someone that people think he's anti-establishment, but I don't see it. He's part of the establishment, but not the way Clinton is. So not many good choices there.
Yeah, I think Trump is probably, you could say, business establishment, but not. At least at the least he makes his money by building things instead of paper printing or these kinds of things.
Right. So let's get back on the Chinese economy. Now, there's been, I think, concentrated effort by the Chinese government to try to pump money into the Chinese stock market and try to boost it and provide liquidity as well. One example is that they're now allowed to use pension fund to invest in the stock market when before it was only fixed income. So is this an act of desperation to try to get the stock market to go back up?
Well, there were a lot over the last year or year and a half. There was a lot of desperate acts by the Chinese government. The Chinese, by inherent nature, are gamblers. That's why Macau is 5 times the size of Las Vegas. And what people don't realize is that money in the stock market, it's not a cataclysmic event when it goes down or up for China, because most of it's just play money. The real assets and what the government's really focused on is in property. That's where most Chinese see their safe kind of bank account money is in their properties. The stock market, it went, it was at 2,000, went up to 6,000, crashed down to 2,000 in economic crisis, stayed there for a few years, then bang, went up 150%. World media barely paid attention, and then it crashed 50%, and everyone's all over about collapsing China. When the market's still up 30, 40%. The market, I see it as not so consequential, although the government is out there defending it every day. They were starting to see bad things Q3 last year where, you got a lot of lower income people piling savings into it, thinking they're going to make millions of dollars, and of course they got taken out to the woodshed and defleeced out of their money. It's something China tries to keep stable, but as we all know, how do you keep a market this size stable through government intervention? It just doesn't work in the long run.
Yeah, in the long run, it just create more boom and bust in the economy. And you're right. The government has been trying for the past year, especially since this past summer when we had that crash in the Chinese market, when the stock market overnight went down double digit, and in reaction, they pretty much gave institutions billions of dollars to try to boost it up and provide more liquidity to the market.
Yep.
And that's no different than what the Federal Reserve has done here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. It's saved the economy by giving money to bankers. The Chinese economy now, the market itself is down 14.3% this year. That's the CSI 300. But all of the focus now has gone from the market to the property. Shanghai property is up 20% this year already, year over year. Beijing's up 12%. Shenzhen is up 50%. Imagine a 50% increase in a year over year. So all of that increased liquidity the government put in is now flown into housing, which was silent or somewhat silent for 3-4 years, and now we're back to the races we saw in 2009, where property prices are just going to the moon.
Again, and people still talk about the ghost town that that you guys have in China, but we have ghost towns here. Just go to Detroit.
Yeah, unfortunately we have different ghost towns. We have postmodern apocalyptic ghost towns in the U.S. Not just Detroit. I mean, if you look at the number of shootings this year in major cities in the United States, it's getting absolutely out of control. I think Chicago's had over 500 shootings already this year.
Oh yeah, it's awful in Chicago and Baltimore too.
Yep, and it's full on collapse in the city centers in the United States, and until we bring back jobs, it's just gonna get worse.
Yeah, that's fortunate because the U.S. government had not done a good job of trying to rehab urban areas in the cities like Detroit and Baltimore. It actually made it worse, with their high taxation and regulation. And did you find it funny that on the academic freedom index, countries like Denmark, which is considered a socialist country, is ranked a lot higher than the U.S. for economic development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spend a lot of time in Scandinavia, and I can tell you those countries are not all cracked up to what people think they are. They might have been 20 years, but the average standard of living now in Denmark, you're living in much smaller homes. The government takes over half of of course they take half of what you earn in the United States, but they're taking 60-70% of what you earn. You're making $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. Very little energy within the economy because it's all been sucked out of it by government taxation and redistribution. And it's not as great as a place as people probably was 20 years ago.
All right, so another thing that people are saying about China is that it's very over-leveraged with the continuing credit expansion. Now, we have a company like Alibaba that they even provide loans to entrepreneurs and small business in China. So what's your thought on that?
China has some gearing with local, like a lot of outstanding debt with local governments. There's debt in place, but unlike the United States, there's actually savings. So China's the highest saving country in the world. Chinese on average save 62% of their take-home pay. There's over $100 trillion in capital in Chinese savings account. There's $4 trillion currency net worth of the central banks, and they push many people into gold. We've talked before. So yeah, there's outstanding credit, but in terms of not being able to manage it, there's a lot of misinformation in the way way people are calculating China's debt to GDP. I don't believe it's accurate at all. And there's not even municipal bonds just started for China, so it's not even like the cities were that in debt. And China is as I mentioned earlier, every year accumulating massive current account trade surpluses. So they're making money. The U.S. is continuing to live off the credit card. So it's really a mirror of the two situations.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Americans here are struggling to save, and it's due to many factors. A lot of it due to, college students. Once they graduated, they have a student debt that's almost equivalent to a house mortgage. And plus, there's not a lot of jobs out there ever since the 2008 financial crisis. So hard to save when nobody had jobs, and a lot of people are working restaurant jobs just to get by.
I posted something on the Chinese Money Report. Americans now have to be content with crap wages and crap jobs. And over a few interviews I've done recently, I kind of broke the idea, which I've noticed, is that new job creation in the United States and China are now basically in parallel in terms of wages. So like when I moved to China in 1998, the Chinese were happy to have a $100 a month job. Today, you can't find people to take jobs for $1,200 a month. Okay, it's not a lot, $1,200 a month. But if you look at a new minimum wage jobs in the United States, which most of the new jobs are, that's also roughly $1,200 to $1,500 a month. So we've already reached parity in wages between China and the United States for new jobs.
I think the biggest problem I have with people when they compare the U.S. economy to China economy, it's not apple to apple. The situation here is very different to what's going on in China. So you can't say that, we're over-leveraged, but look at China. They're over-leveraged too. Their economy is going to crash, just like ours.
Yeah, I don't think if you read what I always tell people too is the mainstream press is thinking China's collapsing. The alternative media, like the zero hedge types, are believing China's collapsing. The hedge fund managers all agree China's collapsing. It's the only place in the world where everyone has the same story, and it never seems to come true. I don't think most people growing up in the West now understand what real economic growth looks like until you've been to China. If you're living in the United States, your cities are old. I've been through most major cities the last couple of years. Everything's old. The transportation's old. Watch a movie from the 1980s of New York City. It looks the same.
It does.
There's nothing new going on. Meanwhile, China has brand new high-speed trains, and they put up in 5 years they put up more high-speed rail than the rest of the world has combined.
We're still waiting for that here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We can't. Azerbaijan has a high-speed train now. We don't even have one. So it's the infrastructure is just rotting. Look at Flint. They can't even get drinking water. They're living in homes that were built in the 1920s and 30s. And that's my hometown area. I know Flint and that area well. Everyone's living in homes that were built almost 100 years ago. There's been almost zero infrastructure growth. There's like no real GDP in the United States. It's actually probably negative. If you calculate how much crap people buy, and yes, the GDP number goes up because healthcare costs go up 10 times, and education costs go up 10 times. And that's part of your GDP. It's really madness now in terms of American economic growth, and I think that's what's fueling rage both on the left and the right in the politics now, and we're getting becoming at a critical juncture point in the American political system.
Yeah, and I remember Obama promising high-speed rail in his 2008 election, and his presidency is almost coming to an end, and yet we don't have any high-speed rail.
Yeah. Well, they've tried to get the Chinese to build some here, and then I don't know what's happened.
Well, I know Elon Musk is building the Hyperloop in California, which is kind of like high-speed rail, a little different. I don't know if you read about that.
I have, yeah. I think it's a design phase now only, though. They're trying to figure out if they could get it to work. But, yeah, I mean, I like Elon Musk. He's a genius. It's that kind of people that could keep us ahead. I mean, his space program's outperforming the Russians and Chinese single-handedly for 1 cent for every dollar that the Chinese or Russians spend. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, isn't free market great?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we rely on guys like those are the kind of guys that push society forward, and we need to make sure they're out there and working for everybody.
Yeah, and our infrastructure is being held by paperclip and bubblegum by the U.S. government.
Yeah, we can't even build roads. I mean, the roads. I never understand when I'm in the U.S. It's like it seems like the roads are always in construction. Chinese will take over a whole road project in 5 days. It's done, brand new road, and you don't have to touch it again for years. You know, in Michigan, we have roads that get done every year every year, same places, and they have to get repaved.
Yeah, I hear in China they can build a skyscraper in 18 months. Is that true?
Yeah, I think I've seen some of that. I think most of them aren't done that quickly, but the speed and the scale of construction in China has really topped what anyone else can do in the world. That's what led to this whole ghost cities. Yes, of course, there's some ghost areas of towns because the government builds up and decides too quickly. But basically, I've lived in these ghost towns that have become packed with people. There's one in Suzhou, Shanghai Pudong, which has 10 million people in it now. It used to be, I used to walk empty by myself in the streets in front of the stock exchange, nobody there. Now there's 10 million people. But what they do is they build out a whole new area of the town in 6 months. It has schools, it has hospitals, and the government doesn't do that. They just say, yeah, we need a hospital, yeah, we need a school. The bids go out, the contractor companies come in, and whoop, 6 months later, everything's up. And of course, it looks like a ghost town because nobody's moved in yet. But over a few years, it fills up. Now, China's been urbanizing the last 10 years. That's coming to an end. China's getting older. They probably have 5 more years of good demographics, and then they're going to start to age, and things will start to change. But you're already seeing, China passed Hollywood in box office receipts this year. Chinese domestically produced films are raking in hundreds of millions of dollars, Hollywood type level with CGI type graphics. There's e-commerce by far larger than the United States. You got Alibaba, a company that makes hundreds of millions of dollars, growing 40% a year, and revolutionizing finance, like you mentioned. Finance and technology are really, and science in general, are going far, far ahead in China. You want to get a genome sequence, it's all going to go through BGI, Beijing Genomics Institute. The U.S. companies just collect it and send it over there. That's another scary proposition. They basically have everyone's DNA that's ever been sequenced from the United States. But China's under a general renaissance. You're seeing it in every area of the economy, the culture, even the military. They're making military equipment now, much faster than we are at 10 cents on the dollar for what we pay. We pay $1 trillion for the F-35 fighter. It doesn't even work. Allies don't even want to buy it. And, it's just the decline in the United States is not just economic. It's cultural. It's spreading all over the United States, and it's leaked into the military even.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the United States, everybody's hating because we can't have nice things like the Chinese.
Well, today it came out, we have 2 groups of rebels now in Syria, one backed by the CIA and one backed by the Pentagon, and they started fighting each other. This is full on ridiculous now coming out of the policy planners in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, the U.S. foreign policy has been a complete failure ever since at the end of World War II. Whatever they try to do hasn't worked. So yep. I think they need to revisit what they've been doing and try something else. But anyway, another question I want to ask you about China. Now, there's been I noticed there's been a shift from the Chinese government to try to make the Chinese a manufactured country to a more consumption country like the U.S. Why is that? Is it because they have too much of their own stuff and they want the Chinese to buy it, or are they trying to stimulate their economy in other ways other than manufacturing jobs?
Yeah, it has to do with the incentives that were built in. So there's VAT tax incentives. So anything you export, you get the tax back. Another one of those things of free trade, one of those big details of free trade nobody ever talks about. Yeah, they had their whole system was set up to manufacture, produce, and export. Well, that comes with high capital intensive projects, a lot of fixed asset investment. This is plants and equipment and people. Well, you basically can't find factory workers anymore in China. You just can't find them. The new generation don't want to work in factories. They're all one child. That's why you're having a robotics revolution in China. Everyone's automating as quickly as they can. So that type of economy, if you really want to go upscale in GDP per capita, you have to go up higher on the value chain, and that's why they're trying to push into more services and get out of the dirty businesses, which also have led to the pollution of the steel making, the coal making. I mean, China at one time makes more steel in 6 weeks than the United States makes all year. So, I mean, these types of, they want to scale down these types of industries and go more towards the service sector to balance the economy. Like the United States, they're highly unbalanced right now, all heavy production focused. But, whereas the United States is, 80% consumption.
And also the Chinese are getting better educated. I know their science and math scores a lot higher than here in America.
Well, for 10 years now, go to any engineering PhD engineering group at a major university, half are Indian, half are Chinese, half are Indian, and you'll only find a few Americans in the group. So yeah, that discipline, hard work, education focus from a young age is leading to good things for them.
Yeah, definitely. So one last thing before I let you go, I want to talk about the gold market and China's frenzy buying spree for the past couple of years. Ever since the gold prices went down a lot from 1,900 all the way down to about 1,000. They've been buying like crazy. But they've been pretty secretive about it. Why?
Well, they've had a plan that they call holding gold through the people for 10 years. I started noticing it back in the day, like you get all the brochures from the banks. Buy gold, hold your bank account in gold at the banks. Every bank account, you could go to the smallest little cities, the local China Construction Bank has a retail outlet selling gold bars and silver bars. And that's been their plan. They were the largest gold producer at 400 tons a year. That's peak. They can't produce that much more, but none of that's left the country. They surpassed India as the largest gold importer. They are, along with Russia, they actively see an end at some point to this fiat dollar system, and who's ever holding real assets, real productive assets, plants, equipment, engineering know-how, and gold and silver, they'll be the winners.
Yeah, and buying demand is through the roof. This past year that I read, I don't know if it's true, but they bought over 1,000 tons of gold. That's almost the whole annual mining supply for the whole country.
Yeah, and they're very reluctant to talk about what their actual reserves are. They came out with it last year, showed it was up, I think 1,500 tons or something. But most of the gold in China is not held at the central bank. It's held by the state-owned banks, People's Bank of China, China Construction Bank, and then held in the assets accounts of the people. There's estimate that in the banks held by individuals, there's over 6,000 tons of gold held now by people in China. That's individuals in banks.
Oh, wow. So how much do you think they have in reserve?
Well, in terms of central bank reserves, I believe their number was they were at like 900 tons, and then I think they went up to like 1,500 tons.
But do you actually think they have 1,500, or do you think they have more?
Well, I think they might have a lot more in another entity, not under the central bank. But they also, I think they spread it out through the whole economy, not just trying to hoard it in one location. So it's held at the central bank, it's held at the state-owned banks, and it's held in individual accounts by people that have bought it.
Right. Well, thank you, Dan, for your time, and thank you for your insight, as always, on what's going on in China. A lot of misconception on the Chinese economy, especially on the mainstream media and the politicians. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Mo. Good talk.
And if people want to find out more about your work, where can they go? I forgot to ask you.
Oh,
Sorry.
no problem. Go to thechinamoneyreport.com.
All right, Dan. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Take care.